In this video, I'm going to be breaking down a concept that I think is really important if you're just getting into Madden 25 and you're trying to get better on the defensive side of the ball. Now, we're going to be in the Jets playbook to do this, but you can pretty much do this out of any formation in the game. If you guys want to learn how I play the game defensively, you can get my full defensive ebooks in our school community, school.com/Cody Ballard. For just $10, you'll be able to get access to all of my Madden and college football 25 offensive and defensive ebooks. And if you want to sign up for that, that link is going to be in the description down below. What we're going to be talking about today is this idea, kind of that Madden, specifically Madden, has been based around pretty much all year long. And we're going to use the kind of best offense in the game, the Eagles playbook, to touch on this. And I'm just going to come out in a basic cover four drop out of dollar. And I want you to just to kind of take a look at what's going on here. So if you take a look at this defense, you're going to see that my safeties are about 10-ish yards off the ball. I'm not base. Actually, let me make sure that that's fixed for you. I need to be base aligned, because if I'm not base aligned, then you're have a whole other slew of issues. So I'm gonna be base aligned when we're talking about this, so you can kind of see what's happening. So you see here when I'm baseline, notice that my safeties are about 5 more yards off the ball, and if I just basically play this kind of coverage, what you're gonna see happen is it's a pretty easy throw right in this little pocket again and again and again. That ball could be thrown on you a ton in this year's game. Same kind of concept is really true on this left side. A couple different ways to make it true. But let's say we ran a play like this. What you would see is this left side, this seam area of the field, wide open again. Now, the main reason for this is if you take a look in instant replay at kind of what is going on this left side of the field. So we have to have hard flats, because if we don't have hard flats, we can just throw the flat. And so you have to take that away. And then the yellow zone is kind of underneath. But really the big issue of this is really right here. Take a look at this safety. Notice that he backpedals, and then he literally just turns and runs for life right here. And this is why these throws are so popular and why they're so hard to take away. And so the best way to actually defend something like this is really there's kind of 2 options. The first option is if you were to go to a cover 2. And so if you go to a cover 2, right, and we'll just give you kind of the standard cover 2 here, I want you to just take a look at these seam streaks and what really happens on this play if we were to go cover 2. So as you'll see here, I can actually throw the tight end up the middle, but other than that, the vert hooks on the outside are going to do a really good job of defending this throw right here. As you see, that's pretty well defended for the most part. If we come over here, kind of the same thing is true. And then if you throw in behind here, this is going to be passing off to the safeties. So the reason that I am personally running a lot more cover 2 right now is because it's much better to keep your safeties backed off. Now, the solution for this for a long time in Madden, and especially this year, has basically been to come out in a double safety type of defense and walk your safeties or get your safeties to get into the box. You're going to see here that if we do that, this is going to make these seam streak throws against cover 4 much less effective, but it doesn't actually solve the problem this year. In previous years, this has pretty much been the solve for these seam streak plays. And in this year's game, you can pretty much still throw them, because at the snap of the ball, those safeties instantly backpedal back into their spots, especially when they are in an inside quarter type of zone. The other issue that this causes is this basically means it's almost impossible to play any other type of defense within this pre-snap look. And the reason why is because you're going to see here that this middle third on the right side is really never going to be able to get back on some of these deep streaks. You're going to see he kind of takes that step. And as you saw right there, the tight end is running wide open up the middle of the field. So if we ran a combination, which I'll actually put a combo on the field now, and we'll kind of go over this, and I'm going to actually just take the rush out of the equation. But let's say we literally just went with a streak, a corner route, a streak, and a drag. Something very basic, right? Watch this tight end just absolutely shred that middle third defender. The reason that he's able to do that is because that middle third defender is in the box. The same basic reason that we can pretty much manipulate any other coverage in the game that is not cover 4 drop out of this. And obviously, if you know what your opponent is doing pre-snap, then there's a whole other slew of issues. As you see here, tight end, once again, those deep halves do not get deep enough, and they're not able to really play any kind of big hitting route. And so you leave yourself very vulnerable to the deep bombs by bringing those safeties in the box this year. So there's a couple different ways in which we can solve the problem, but I think the main way that I like to solve this problem, and what I'm starting to do right now, is actually just come out in basically base out of a cover 2 defense. And the reason why is because this vert hook is what's going to really defend the seam streak. Now, in this situation, one of the challenges is that this vert hook will defend this right side seam, but what is going to defend the tight end seam? Especially if, for example, my user is over here. So if we were to run a coverage like this, which is a pretty popular coverage, this is why I think that this formation is so meta, is because it does a really good job of attacking this type of defense. And so you have to, kind of handle the seam streaks a little bit differently. So what I like to do from this is I like to have my vertical hook. And then the other thing that I like to do is I like to take this this right side safety, and I'm going to pinch him in just a little bit. And I'm actually going to put him in a middle third or an inside quarter, either one. And then I'm going to leave this cloud flat. I could also put this in a quarter if I wanted to, but I'm going to leave this cloud flat because most of the combos I can easily switch stick to that side if I needed to give some help over there. And then what I'm able to do now is I'm able to kind of get back into this coverage. And the reason why I walked that right side safety into the box is because he is now going to play this throw pretty much perfectly. The basic depth that you really want for these safeties is you really want them at about 10 yards of depth. I think that is kind of the best. If you bring them any lower than that, they're susceptible to the big play over the top. If you leave them any higher, then the seam streaks are basically open. But this idea that the positioning of your safeties is one of the most important things in this game, I think it's something that's really not being talked about a ton. And it's why, again, I like to kind of base out of this cover 2. And essentially, I just kind of like position them a little bit or almost pinch them in to try to take the seam streak away because I have the vertical hooks to take the outside streaks away. I just need something for this tight end streak right here because if not, that's too easy of a throw. Now, granted, pretty much every card at this game at this point, or pretty much another thing that's really key with this is having mid-zone KO. But by having mid-zone KO, you're really able to play defense, in my opinion, a lot better. Another thing we could do is we could also just use her over on this side and we could run a defense like this because we're able to kind of go between both of these routes if we wanted to. This is another little option that you have. It just kind of depends on how you want to use her things. But in general, the cure is not just coming out in double safety go anymore because if you do that, it's kind of too easy to bomb you. But you also don't want to leave them too far backed off. And so that's where I started to even consider like show blitz look, different things like that. But in general, the problem with that is, as you see, those outside corners, there's really not a great reason to have the outside corners press up in this game, in my opinion. So you're kind of in this position again, where you almost want like a 3 high look like this and, kind of getting into more of a true basic cover 2 type of concept. So these are just some of the ways that you can stop these seam streaks. I think the seam streaks are very overpowered, but there is, some help with different ways in which you can defend them. And ultimately, you have to kind of, every formation's a little different. So if we were to, normal I have close is a little different because, there's really two seam streak threats on the play. Whereas if I was to go to a formation like bunch nasty, for example, or bunch strong offset, any of those type of formations, then what you're going to see here is the seam streak threat is really this right side is really the primary seam streak threat. So what we're able to do here is we're able to kind of get back more into this type of coverage, and we just shade these yellows inside. And again, this is why I really like to pinch this guy in. I think pinching these safeties in is very helpful, but in general, you don't want to pinch them too far. That's like super important. So anyways, this is kind of what I like to do. And now you'll see, like if I try to throw this seam streak, you can't really throw it because I have that vertical hook there. So it makes formations like bunch, I think, less effective, and formations like normal Y off close a lot more effective. But in general, I think something like this extent here is probably ultimately the coverage that you want to be in for the most part, because you're able to kind of user this one streak, you're able to user the left side seam streak, and then you're not going to get crucified by the right side seam streak because you have the vertical hook here. I just would probably either inside quarter this guy directly, which I think is perfectly an option, or I would just move him in a little bit to try to prevent that kind of deal from happening. But what you'll see with this defense is if this is done properly, then let's say we get a combination, like this, for example, we're going to be in a pretty good spot to be able to handle something like that. So in general, those are some tips and tricks that I've been using for stopping, some of these seam streaks and big issues. I want to thank you for watching the video. And if you guys want to take your Madden or college football game to the next level, join our school community. That link is going to be in the description down below.